Good afternoon, Melton Guy here. Took a few days off for Thanksgiving and decided I'd give myself a rest and the airwaves a rest, and YouTube and everything else. Uh, I think it was deserved by me and by all of you not to have to listen to me. And in saying that, I want to say thank you to those who subscribe to my podcast. I have a very dear friend out there, been a friend for many, many years, one of the greatest people I know. I never met a friendlier person in my life, and a sweet and nice person as this person, one of my subscribers. So a hearty hello to Marlena. You know who you are. I also like to plug my book, The Offspring of Ignorance. I'm not going to hold it up today because I got bigger fish to fry, as they say. And my wife's book, Leaving Small Town, by Sue Guy, mine by J. Melton Guy, and you can find both of them on Amazon. And I hope you will go out. I really do want you to buy my book and her book. Buy both of them. And I think it's a good time to tell you that I think it's really important with all the things that have taken place in the last few weeks that you go out and you find people to listen to. And I used to say, I want you to listen to everybody, but like I was recommending it. I cannot recommend some anymore. You have every right to listen to them. And it might do you good too, listen to them. But I do want you to listen. I do recommend Tennessee Brando, part of the Midas Touch Network, out of Mockery. Jesse Dollamore. There are so many more. Ben Masilis and Brett Masilis. I urge you to listen to them. Occupy Democrats. Those are good places to listen to, and they'll give you the whole story. They won't just give you a piece and make you believe something that's not true. They'll give you the story. They'll give you the backside, and you can be informed. I do not recommend, as I used to say, also listen to Fox, but I do not recommend Fox any longer. If you'll excuse me just a minute, I left my TV on. It's bothering me. The officers put Artiega in the back of the patrol car until a female officer can come conduct a search of her. Okay, I'm back. I knew there was something I had not done. But anyway, those names that I mentioned, I really wish you'd go out on YouTube and other places and find them. They have things to say. And for some of us, this is some pretty rough times. And we're trying to figure out a way to get through it, what we need to do next. And they'll help you in that regard. I found them to be therapeutical. And I find them to be informed. And that's what you need. It's what we all need. But like I said, I do not recommend Fox anymore. I've listened to them and listened to them. And as I used to say about Tucker Carlson, I want to watch Tucker Carlson every day. I want to be there when he tells the whole truth. When something comes out of his mouth that is the whole truth, I want to be there. I no longer even want you to do that. But like I say, I can't tell you who to watch or who to listen to, and you know that. But I'm telling you, I'm trying to come at an angle today to help us to understand the problem that we've been facing for a while now. And we certainly found it to be true in this last election. We have been part in the subject or the enemy or the game that the predator is after of a propaganda machine. A propaganda machine equaled only by that which came out of 1930s and 40s Germany under the Nazis and the Third Reich, Adolf Hitler. Never been equaled as far as I know. I'm a man of history. One of my majors is in history, and I specifically studied Germany and European and Asian history, and this kind of propaganda that we're faced with today cannot be matched until I go back to then. And one of the things and a lot of things come out of that. A lot of things happen when you hear something over and over again not being true. Just throw it out there, throwing things out there, throwing it up against the wall, as I say, to see what will stick. What they're saying is to see what those people out there uninformed will believe and pick up. One example is this, and that's a big one, and that is the word liberal. I'm a liberal. I have some conservative views, but if anybody ranked me or put me on that political spectrum, they would put me in that left called liberal. The problem is what I want to say to you, regardless of what you hear and how you hear it and who says it, liberal, the word liberal is not a curse word, as Republicans, MAGA Republicans especially, would have you believe. But this propaganda began not with Donald Trump. The very embryonic stages of it took place when Bill Clinton beat George Bush, the senior Bush, because it really was not Bill Clinton beating George Bush. It was Bill Clinton beating Ronald Reagan. That's the way it was in the mind of people. Bush was Reagan's man. So when he beat George Bush, everybody was angry. Everybody got upset, and they wanted to get back on the right. And that's where this propaganda thing really got its feet and really began to take off. But the word liberal is not a curse word, as Republicans, especially on the MAGA side, which is about all Republicans now, would have you believe. Liberal, as they would have you believe, is not un-American. On the contrary, just about every major social change that helped the people of this country, our elderly, our youth, our children, our mothers, and you name it, was started from a very liberal standpoint, if that's what you want to call it. But you got to know what liberal means. And contrary to many belief, liberal is not unchristian. Absolutely not. Again, on the contrary, if you look at the things Jesus said, Democrats are not against religion, and they'll come right out and tell you that. Some of the god-awful names that we've been called by such people as, and it sticks in your craw when Margaret Taylor Greene, somebody like that, or Lauren Boebert, or people like that say something, and then the king of the troll, Donald Trump. No, it's not anti-Christian. Not because what it does, it promotes beliefs of, or at the very least, promotes one's right to practice one's belief or faith or whatever you prefer to call it, like no other philosophy. And here's the general definition. There's several of them of this word liberal. Number one, willing to accept and or respect behavior or opinions different from one's own. In other words, I'm not always right. I may be always right, but But I'm not the only way to think. Everybody has opinions. You should be allowed to have those opinions, as long as it does not destroy someone else or something, like an institution, like political parties or churches or whatever. In the definition, it says it's open to new ideas. And in the political context, favoring policies that are progressive. What's wrong with that? And promote the general welfare of human beings. Now, if you find something wrong with all that, I think you're reaching. I think you're just trying to find something wrong. In theology, regarding many traditional beliefs, liberals believe some are dispensable. I believe that. I believe some are invalidated by modern thought, liable to change, and been proved out. A good example, when I was a boy, you could hardly do anything on Sunday. Now you can do anything you do on Monday, on Sunday. But it used to be a very religious thing. But that changed. Stores didn't even open, for the most part. It's hard to find a place on Sunday to buy even drugs. But all that's changed. And all of it was buried in religious thought and dogma. And it didn't kill us when we stopped feeling that way. Another definition, it relates to or denotes a political and social philosophy that promotes individual rights, civil liberties, democracy, and free enterprise. Is that not America? Is that not what our democracy is? If you're finding something wrong here, again, you're grasping at straws. You're reaching for something. You want to find something wrong. A more general definition is a liberal, someone who gives or uses or things that they do occurs in generous amounts. Very liberal with his money, very liberal with his thought, very liberal with whatever you have, you share. Not everybody's that way. That's the general meaning of the word liberal. It doesn't say you do it in excess. It just means that you give in generous amounts, whatever you're giving. And then the last meaning that I want to share with you is concerned. It is concerned. Liberalism, liberals, concerned with broadening a person's general knowledge and experience. And I know the first thing that's going to come to many of your minds is woke. And woke is a word, is an acronym, or whatever it is, that should never have been put out there. Ignorant people put these things out. People who believe that you should not learn as much as you can learn about your past, about your present, hopefully using those to go forward to make your future better. Anybody that believes you shouldn't do that, they are ignorant. And they are very opposite of what they are opposing, which is woke. I did a podcast where I said, I'm just about as woke as I can be. That's not true. I want to know more. I always want to know more. Our children should always want to know more. We should instill that in our children to learn, to know more. And then you have this thing about we can't go this way, we can't go that way because moving away from the liberal part of things now, we are stuck in our tradition because we were created as a Christian nation. Wrong. It's been pointed out to you that God is not mentioned in any of our documents. One place where they mentioned and just alluded to God, but no, nothing was. This picture you may have, and I saw it. I've saw it many times, and it still makes me sick, of Kenneth Copeland saying that George Washington got on his knees and dedicated this country to God. That is not true. That is a lie. Coming out of the mouth of a man who's supposed to be a man of God. But that's what propaganda can do. No, we were not created as a Christian nation. One of our founding fathers, and I will not mention his name, even died with the opportunity to profess Jesus Christ and wouldn't do it. He was a deist. I'm not saying he didn't believe in Jesus, but you would never hear one of our founding fathers, that would be, whether it be George Washington, who himself was Episcopalian, but leaned toward the deist. His beliefs were toward the deism. You would never hear one of them, George Washington and John Adams and Benjamin Franklin or Thomas Edison. You would never hear one of them, not Thomas Edison, Benjamin Franklin. Something on why I link Franklin and Edison together, I guess because he invented things. That's how your mind works sometimes. But all these people, they would never stand before a crowd or before a church or gathering and declare that I am a born-again Christian. I profess Jesus Christ as my Lord and Savior. They never did it, and they never would do it. Did that mean they had no ideas of a Christian? No. Christianity can be found, or the idea, the philosophy of Christianity can be found not only in the Bible, but in other books, in other history. We've been taught to be afraid to face the truth. We've been taught to be afraid to learn the truth. That's the reason I think that this woke thing took off like it did. It really messed up our minds, if you will. It's fear. I know when I wrote my book, I went against all the teachings that I picked up as a boy in church from my father, who was a Methodist minister himself. And I went against all those traditions, and I was afraid the whole time, but I was writing what I knew, and I knew that I could back up. We had a thing when I went to graduate school, when I was going to get my theological degree. We had a thing, it was there before I got there, but you could hear it said among the students, talking about what you were going to hear, what you're going to learn. It might not be up your alley, as they say. And that term was, don't mess with my Jesus. Or don't, even if it's the truth, don't say anything against my Jesus. Or even if it's the truth, don't come in here and try to disqualify any part of what we call the Holy Bible. Well, in that experience, I've said this on other occasions, I learned many, many things, and I learned a lot in class. But I learned more in the great library of that institution, and libraries and archives in many different places I would frequent to learn more. And all those things I learned about those traditional beliefs that we were been fed for years and years, centuries, every pastor that went this route, every pastor learned the same as I learned. But none of us for some reason, probably for preservation or fear, did not share it with the church. We did not share it with our people. We did not share it with our children. We came back to the status quo, I think, because of fear and preservation. But I have realized since that I'm speaking for myself, I have realized since that I was not doing anybody any favors. I was not doing my church any favors. I was not doing people, my parishioners, I was not really doing them any favors. I was not doing myself any favors, my family any favors. So I don't want to hear any Bible lessons. I don't want no dialogue or no discussion unless in a formal arrangement, because I've been there 35, 45 years. I've done that. And I actually am ashamed of my contribution to the conventional theological teachings of the church. Why won't we get it across? Why don't we find a way to get it across? Because until one, and that's just one of you, becoming many, can accept the truth of the Bible, to accept the real truth of God, the real truth of Jesus, what I know and what I should have been telling the church, two different things, but it makes a difference. And I'm not going to start off with a big lecture on the antiquities of theological teachings. But I am going to share this, because for years, it's what comes to mind. For years, I was always taught that Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy were the 5 books of Moses, that he wrote those books. And I'm telling you now, it was impossible. He did not write these books. If Moses ever existed, and I for one have no real proof that he ever did, but if he ever existed, he did not write these books. These books were written by many authors, which I learned. And like I said, given the time, if you're willing to listen, I won't do it on a podcast. You can find some other forum, but I will not do it on a podcast, but I will tell you. Those books were written by other authors, and we do not know who they are. That's just one thing. So jump over to the New Testament. And in the beginning, it starts Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. Number one, I don't know why it was not Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John, because Mark was the first gospel that was written, the so-called gospel. But see, I always had it in my head that at some point, as a child, and even beyond that these archaeologists and all these other people, theologians that went on these digs, that went out in these places, way before we came along, found this book. And it was the Holy Bible, what we call the Holy Bible. And that's not true. Not only did they not do that, when they found Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they did not find those books together. They did not find those books all at the same time. One was found here, one was found here, and at different times. And when they found them, they were written anonymously. I don't know how Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John became the names of those books. Now, there might have been these names, but most people got in their mind that some of these are people that walk with Jesus. Not true. These people never knew Jesus Christ. These books were written 25 to 30 years. That's being very generous after the death of Jesus, when Jesus supposedly died. And you have to understand that everything that they wrote at that time, had not only had it come from out of an oral tradition, people just talking amongst themselves, it was a oral tradition coming out of the mouths as the Aramaic language, which is an archaic language now. It doesn't exist really, it's not spoken. And then it was translated into a Greek language. Now, if you can't grasp what all that takes, and how something can be lost in all that, but get it out of your mind, if nothing else, today, that Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John did not walk with Jesus, and these books were written many decades after the death of Jesus as we know it. As a matter of fact, just throw it out there for you, the writings of Paul, the Apostle Paul, as we know him, they came before any of these Gospels. That was the first thing written. I'm not trying to destroy anyone's faith. I'm just trying to let you understand that propaganda can do things to people, and the untruth just adds to it. When you got a group of people calling another group of people names they do not deserve, or refer to them as, those damned liberals or those left-wing liberals, they eating babies and, performing abortions in the 9th and 10th month and all this kind of stuff. And then you got untruth out there. You got people like Mike Johnson who will uphold it, and you believe it because he says, I'm a Christian. We start off on the wrong foot, and it's high time that you begin to listen. It's time for you to grow up, whoever you are, and understand that this book, the Bible, was written thousands of years ago, along with many other books that we can discover. And why has it become the most famous? Marketing. Marketing. Somebody used it way back then, just like Republicans are using it now, or did use it, and are still using it as a marketing tool to reach out to a crowd. Reach out to a crowd that either are ignorant, want to be ignorant, as I refer to them, chosen ignorance, or they're like these fish in the sloughs I talked about earlier. You throw an empty hook out there and they're just ready to grab it. But that doesn't make it truth. You have this Kevin Stitt, the governor of Oklahoma. He's a liar. I would tell him to his face. And I tell him why I know he's a liar. He's very much misinformed. And then, as I mentioned, Mike Johnson, as far as from being a Christian, as I know a Christian to be, as I have ever known or known of, maybe with the exception of Donald John Trump. There is right now, and I'm going to call it like I see it, there is a pervasive violence in the Republican Party in MAGA that has indeed permeated into the American church to the extent that they have no true witnesses of their so-called gospel, no true witnesses of their so-called Lord Jesus Christ, the Son of God. Not anymore. If you're thinking that we still have churches, then you're wrong. They bastardized themselves and they latched on to Donald Trump, or they bastardized themselves by not coming out against this man, this fascist. And because of all these things, the Bible has become sheer nonsense because of imposing figures spouting off while wearing sheep's clothing, if you get my drift. Wearing sheep's clothing over a not so hidden wolf. The Bible, thousands of years old, and for the most part irrelevant to many of the real problems of our world and of our country. However, those names I mentioned above, Trump, Mike Johnson, Kevin Stitt, and an array of other pagans and heathens and racists and haters and cowards and preachers and evangelicals and prosperity gospel gangsters are knocking at your door every day. They're throwing that empty hook, hoping the pond is full. Yes, I'm judging, and that lest you be not judged thing is crap, because Republicans and MAGA insane fools have been judging me and anyone who will not fall in line with their wicked agenda. Issues have been misrepresented, distorted, and when they couldn't do that, they made up actual lies and then fed it to you. And you being in a state, if you're not one of these, ignore this, state of chosen ignorance, bought it, took it, hook, line, and sinker, as they say. I compared the slough story, that's what I call this, about the fish and the sloughs that would bite anything. I compare it to sometimes to something Voltaire, M. de Voltaire, said. He's an 18th century satirist and philosopher, and he has a lot of. I'd recommend Voltaire. He'll make you angry, but he'll make you think, and it got some good stuff. But remember, he is a philosopher and he was a satirist, but I recommend him. But he made a statement, probably his most famous statement, is that if God did not exist, God would have to be invented. And I think we've seen that. I want you to think about that. If God didn't exist, he'd have to be invented. How has God changed in your life and in your history books? I don't want to hear this story about God's the same yesterday, today, and forever. Yo, be truthful. Be real. You see what makes all this so bad? The church, Sunday school classes, loving ladies most of the time, brought cookies for your Sunday school class, talked about loving each other, walk up and hug you when they met you on the street, and when you go to church, they'd hug you, and the little old preacher would come around and visit and tell you about all the good things going on in the church and how people are just loving one another, and dinner on the grounds. That's what makes it so bad. That church, I remember very well. And the little Bible lessons that we learned that taught us how to find a direction in life. I remember those well. And that's what makes the distortion that has come about. And those stories are still there, and that truth is still there. If we can only demythologize the Bible. And I think we're going to have to do that to the church. If you read in the book of Genesis, I don't go to the Old Testament much, but this is appropriate. When he was talking to his people in the book of Genesis that were about to go out, they were all things, they were cast out of Garden of Eden, and so now things were changed, and they were about to go out and find the world. And God told them to. He said, go out to these lands. And he made this remark. There's gold out there. And it is good. And I'm not trying to destroy your Bible. I'm not trying to destroy your church. I'm saying that we'll look in the right direction, in the right ways. We'll find the gold out there and discover the good again. And I say that to you when you're studying history, when you're studying politics, when you're listening to political rallies and listening to all the candidates. You think about the day and think to yourself, there must still be some of that gold out there. And I'm not going to stop fighting till I find it. For me and my family. If you will, reach down and push that button and subscribe to my podcast. If you can take it. Give me a like. And do the same for all those names I mentioned earlier. Tennessee Brando and the others. Until I see you at the next roundup. Have a good day.